Welcome back to this edition of Insights. I'm joined by ACC Professor of Political Science, Tim Kuhnlein. And Tim, we ended before the break, talking about private militarization. So now I want to bring that back and how that kind of relates to private education.
Well, it does come kind of full circle because if you explore how our military operations have been, from the public realm, shifted towards more and more of these privatization endeavors. And we're not talking necessarily here about the building or the construction of weaponry and so forth. That's clearly been done by the private sector, but it's many of the services that have been farmed out to private sector companies, just like intelligence. Basically these are models then for what is likely to happen in education. And they're some of the same people. I mean, Erik Prince, Blackwater, Betsy DeVos, education. We're talking about a close-knit, a very sort of narrow mindset. It's coming out of a libertarian philosophical movement, but there's much more to it than that when you dig into it a little more deeply. But what we see here is basically shifting public resources back into the private sector with the idea that the private sector is somehow going to do a better job at it. And with charter schools, for the most part, we don't see those statistics. And where we do see those statistics of better performance, which was ideally the final goal, right, not profit, we see that it's in those states where we have high regulations and just a limited number of schools. Most states don't have high volumes of charter schools like we had in Michigan, 300 charter schools in Michigan. And unregulated, and the performance level is abysmal. 80% of our charter schools for Michigan are in the Detroit area, and 70% of those are in the bottom quarter of performing schools in Michigan. So the statistics don't pan out. In most other states where we have charter schools, the charter schools are fewer in number because they're highly regulated, and they're often created just for a specific purpose, a certain population. And so, if we're going to see this happen in education like we've seen in the military-industrial complex, and we're going to see the chaos that we're seeing in the intelligence community, we're in for a very rocky road. And the question is it going to translate into outcomes that help improve education?
And that's kind of what the topic was during a lot of Betsy DeVos's confirmation hearings. They were saying, if they're not showing these results that you want to see, what's the point of establishing more charter schools or giving them more money, especially when public schools need to be risen up as well?
Well, I think the larger point is that we're faced with a very, very significant philosophical challenge here. And I'm not sure most people are conscious of where this goes and what the implications are. Michigan is a template of what can go wrong. The other parts of the country are a template of what could go well if it's done reasonably. How much damage can Betsy DeVos do for her critics? How much damage? Well, she's supposed to execute federal law, right? Will she challenge that federal law? Of course. But it's a minor amount of money in the scheme of things, $20 billion that they might play with. Will it force people to maybe rethink and think over what they're doing? Of course. It's going to get a lot of things riled up. But if we think that this is going to somehow solve this proposition, solving the problem, we're kind of fooling ourselves. To me, the larger question here is who's doing what and for what end goal? And I think we need to take a good hard look at that, especially with the dynamic that we're seeing unfold as we move into the second month of this administration.
Yeah, like you said, especially with these cabinet picks, there's a lot of personal gain that some of these people could get out of. We see with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, CEO of ExxonMobil, who could be dealing overseas, might be doing that for his private business.
And maybe not for themselves personally, although that does translate, but these corporate interests, the for-profit agenda. And that's all fine if it produces outcomes. But as I've been saying, in terms of charter schools and public education, they're not producing the outcomes. We see with graduation rates actually very high for charter schools, but the performance rates on test scores and things of that sort are at basically equal to traditional schools, if not worse.
And so that's kind of the big crux of their argument to put the money in the charter schools, because It was that whole proficiency debate they had too.
But the problem is what we're doing is dissipating the resources so far that no one, I mean, these charter schools are in malls and old schools, and they're not the best of conditions. Well, they may get a little bit more money, but there are going to be multiple more organizations like this. So they're not necessarily qualitatively improving. Numerically, they're improving. And then your traditional schools are going to have less money. So the overall qualitative standard is going to depreciate unless we pump more money. But we already pump more money into education than any other country in the world. We've been taking that away. One might argue starving the problem. Perhaps the starving is rooted at the wrong issue, because it's cutting schools off at their knees.
Well, it's definitely some fascinating stuff, Tim. Thank you for joining me this morning, and thank you for joining us. If you want to catch more insights, you can catch us at the same time, same place.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.